Okay, we've all heard about these giants of old, and in my previous video revealing the nature of the Watchers and the Nephilim, I've shown you that it all goes back to the characters in Greek mythology, and specifically pointed out the text of the books from the Loeb Library that prove that. Now, it's my theory that these people really existed, and they existed over 15,000 years ago, between 15 to 19,000 years ago, per some of the writings that indicate a timeline. One area that I'm specifically looking is the Lovelock Cave area out in Nevada. In previous videos, I've talked about the legend of the red-haired giants being exterminated off by the Paiute. There were allegedly 2,600 of them. And that legend has been corroborated by evidence. There were mummies and artifacts taken out of that cave in the early part of the 20th century. Two guano miners found it. They took some of it out. Some of it was taken by private collectors, and then two anthropologists came out, one from the University of California, one from the Hay Foundation, to study it further. Now, some of the the mummies from that cave are at the University of, the Museum of Nevada in Carson City. Others are rumored to be at the University of California. The Hay Foundation, their artifacts and mummies have gone to the Smithsonian. I am in contact with the Smithsonian trying to get an accounting of what they have, and I have yet to get an answer. One of the mummies, or some of the best mummies, were given to a fraternity, and the fraternity boiled and destroyed that mummy. And these mummies are not allowed to be DNA tested or examined due to NAGPRA. Now, in the book Lovelock Cave by Llewellyn L. Lau and M.R. Harrington, the two anthropologists that did a scientific study of the cave, they have indicated some very interesting things, and I want to read a couple of some of the passages. Okay, from the book, page 2 of my 1929 version out of University of California Press, Berkeley, California, it states, "The best specimen of the adult mummies was boiled and destroyed by a local fraternal lodge which wanted the skeleton for initiation purposes." Now that's rather strange. Out of that cave, artifacts such as several atlatls were retrieved. I was told that they had a lot of effigies. Many of them were insect effigies. I didn't see any of those at the Nevada Museum, but I did see some animal effigies and a human head that seemed to be elongated. It was a carving. Now, let me read from page 2. "A perfect spear thrower, or atlatl, went to a private collector in California, and at his death was lost." Okay. Now, interestingly enough, when I was out at the Valley of Fire, there's a very large wall with petroglyphs that has to be protected now because of vandalism. But on there, it shows the scene of people using an atlatl to hunt with, and what I assume to be corn. A ladder, concentric circles, the cross of Quetzalcoatl, and animals. Next to that petroglyph, below it on the same wall, is appears to be a large Phoenician ship with what appears to be a scorpion. And slightly below it is a smaller ship that appears Phoenician. And I'm going to compare the two in this video and show you some pictures from Wikipedia that has something very similar from Phoenicia. So take a look. Now, it's said that the mummies were the red-haired people were exterminated, and allegedly there was a Paiute man still alive during the time that the cave was being excavated that took place in the extermination. It says from page 2 of the Lovelock Cave, no date, of course, is given for this event, yet an old northern Paiute man recently died at Stillwater, who is said to have taken part in it, and to have had one eye shot out by an arrow in one of the charges in the cave mouth. Well, that would place it in the 1800s. I'm not so sure, but possibly. Sarah Winnemucca said she had a red hair in a dress from who they killed, and she was around in the 19th century, so it's possible. Now, also outside of, Valley of Fire, there's a lot of different crosses of Quetzalcoatl and animals, and next to the Atlatl petroglyph is a very, very large rock, and it has something called desert varnish on it, but you can still see the petroglyphs. And there's a lot of feet, some adults, some children, some with 6 digits, most with 5. On there, what is interesting to me is a spiral symbol with sun rays coming out. It's pretty much the same symbol that was put on the red-haired man Tarim mummy known as David in China. So we'll compare the two here real quick. Now, what else is interesting is this other version of the sun spiral. It's a spoked version. Here's a picture from Valley of Fire outside of Vegas, compared to a screenshot of what I've done, or what was taken out at Winnemucca Petroglyphs. That is slightly outside of Reno, Nevada, and it's the same symbol. So my understanding is there were, as I just read, there were atlatls that were found in Lovelock Cave, and there were atlatls or atlatl drawn on the Valley of Fire. So I would assume there's a connection. And assuming that those are ships, you have to wonder how connected all of it is. Now, Llewellyn Loud compared the Lovelock cave culture to the basket maker culture. He also states in that book on page 163, the story is that the northern Paiute used to capture these people, cut off the fingers, penis, and ears, and tie these to the blankets of the girls, or throw them into the midst of a group of girls playing games to tease them. After the ancient Sai were driven out of Nevada, the northern Paiute and Washoe fought together against the Pitt River Indians. That's out of the book called Lovelock Cave by Llewellyn L. Loud and M.R. Harrington, page 163. So pretty gruesome. There is indication there was cannibalism, a small amount of it. Out of that book, it says, the other bones and fragments of mummies were mere strays and not worth recording except a series of 3 human bones found near the surface in Lot 7, just back of the great fallen rocks blocking the mouth of the cave. These had been split to extract the marrow, and animal bones were split, and probably indicate cannibalism during a famine. These were the only artificially split human bones found during all of our digging in the cave. That's Llewellyn L. Loud and M.R. Harrington, Lovelock Cave, from the book from 1929, page 18. We'll go further. Here's an indication of the fire was in the cave. All right, from the same book, page 20. Among the more unusual objects were a bone awl, a bunch of feathers tied together, a pointed stick with a cord attached, a fragment of an object of soft stone with a groove near the point, 2 arrow foreshafts for flaming arrows, one wrapped with inflammable rush, the other having bound to it a piece of charred punky wood, which had doubtless been burning when it was shot into the cave, several fragments of decoy birds made of rushes, a section of dried windpipe of some animal, and some felted vegetable down. Okay, and then it continues on page 112 out of the same book from Llewellyn Loud. Another implement found in the older levels of Lovelock Cave, 72 inches deep, which is also associated with basket maker remains farther south and east. It is a sickle-shaped implement of mountain sheep horn, shown in plate 6D. All right, continuing on in that book, tending to confirm the northern Paiute legend of the assault of the cave are the fire arrow foreshafts, shown in plate 46CD. The inflammable parts are dry reed, and in one instance, and grass in the other. Several were found in a partially burned condition, including one in which the inflammable part was a piece of dry rotten wood or punk, which would glow and smolder. That's from page 115 of Lovelock Cave. And then it continues on. Kidder estimates the basket maker period along about 1500 to 2000 years BC. Now, the early period of our cave belongs to the basket maker horizon, and therefore, if Kidder is right, an estimate of 1000 BC would be a conservative guess as to the date of the first occupation of Lovelock Cave. That's page 120. Now, I'm going to read some more from that book that corroborates the red-haired people and that there was an attack on that cave through fire. It states, certain features of the cave may have given rise to the Paiute story. In the case, that story is pure fiction. 1. There are strata of grass and tulle in the cave which are carbonized. Fires started by sparks from torches of bold explorers may have smoldered for days in such deposits. 2. Much of the hair found on the mummies in the cave is reddish. Similar hair is known from mummies from the Pueblo region, Peru, and elsewhere, the color being due to age or chemical action. 3. The smell of the cave with its immense deposit of bat guano suggests burnt bodies and made Ishi, a Yahi Indian, reluctant to enter a room at the museum where cave specimens were stored. That was on page 166. Here's the account from the miners that went into that cave initially. It states in that Lovelock Cave book, quote, in the south end of the cave, about 20 feet deep, we unearthed some skeletons. In the north central part of the cave, about 4 feet deep, was a striking-looking body of a man, 6 feet 6 inches tall. His body was mummified and his hair distinctly red. There was a grass rope about his neck with a knot under the left ear. The rope was about 8 feet long. The feet were bound together from the ankle to above the knees with stout rope. The mummification was complete, except for a part of the abdomen. The other mummies all had red hair. I think there were either 4 or 5. Those that appeared to be women were small, something like a Japanese woman in height. This was not altogether due to the shrinking of the bodies to mummifying, because the man was a giant. The women had on moccasins which reached clear to their knees. The buckskins were beaded with shells. 2 of them had a kind of buckskin gown that came down to their knees. These bodies were from the deep south end of the cave. From the account of Mr. James H. Hart in regards to the first excavation of Lovelock Cave, pages 168 through 169 out of the book Lovelock Cave by Llewellyn Loud and M.R. Harrington. Okay. Okay. Now, this Asian mummy, her name was Zinzu, and she was a Chinese mummy known as Lady Dai. She was the wife of Marquis Li Kang from 186 BC, so over 2,000 years old. And he was a chancellor for the imperial fiefdom of Changsha during the Han Dynasty. And her mummy was found in 1971 near the city of Changsha. So nothing really changed with this woman. You could look at Buddhist monks. I've got something here that shows that the gray hair didn't change. Another one of the monks in this article appears to have some dark hair left. Also, I want to point out that none of this stuff has been properly studied by qualified anthropologists and scientists. The FBI uses some very good forensic anthropologists to look at hair and identify race. There are differences in Caucasoid, Black African, they call it Negroid hair, and Mongoloid hair. That's how it's broken down anthropologically. And if you ask a beautician or somebody that works on hair, they'll tell you there's differences in the hair, and there's differences on how that hair reacts to chemicals. So there is a science to that, as well as there's a science to the physical anatomy, specifically the skull. You can tell some racial features, as well as DNA. And in America, that is prevented, but there's no excuse for mummies in Peru at this point in time from being properly studied by a qualified team of anthropologists and scientists. And in fact, these mummies were discovered slightly over 100 years ago. And it was discovered by an anthropologist named Julio Tello, who came out of that South America, and he ended up being sent to Harvard University to study the science of anthropology and archaeology so he can come back and do a proper study of this. And so it's been over, almost 100 years that they've been looking at these strange cultures that make no sense. And a lot of it also, has been subject to grave robbers. So some of it's been destroyed, and they're trying to keep it intact the best that they can. And here's another picture from this Mummies of the World tour that has a red-haired mummy from South America. We don't know anything about her. Where did they get it? But they go on exhibit all over the world, and nobody's studied her DNA. We don't know. So definitely we need to have a qualified team at this point in time. It's just absolutely ridiculous that nobody is taking this seriously the way that they took Kennewick Man seriously. I mean, we need to have the same thing. A team has to get together and take a look at this. Okay, so as I read here, there appears to be a connection with the mummies at Lovelock Cave, the Pueblo people, which would include your Anasazi, and the Paracas mummies. Now, I'm going to just point out something. Where are the red-haired Pueblo mummies? How come we don't see them? We have pictures of the Paracas mummies. They won't let us have pictures of what was in Lovelock Cave, although there are some pictures of skulls, some normal size, some of gigantic or gigantism size skulls, and those are floating around on the internet, but we can't get a proper picture of them due to NAGPRA. But why aren't we seeing any old pictures of the Pueblo mummies that had red hair? Okay, it's a cover-up. This is an incredibly big cover-up. Now, I just saw an article that over in Siberia, they found a artificially deformed cranial skull attached to a full skeleton, and they're associating it initially with the Sarmatians. And the Sarmatians were this ancient tribe out of that area that came from very tall Scythian men who married Amazon women, what was left of them. And those that follow my research know that the Atlanteans, who are the Cronides and their ancestors referred to as Atlanteans by Diodorus Siculus, enticed the Amazons to fight with the Gorgons, and they both mutually exterminated each other off, and what few survivors were left had to go to different tribes, and they blended in. But there's also something written that the Amazons traveled the world as well as the Cronides. So what are we going to say now, or what are the Native Americans going to say now that this has been found out in, Siberia, and it's being studied by some Russian scientists, so you can't hide it. They don't have NAGPRA over there. And interestingly, there is a culture called the Malta culture, and they did find skeletal remains dating back 17,000 to 24,000 years out of that area in Siberia that were DNA tested and shown to be part European and part Asian. There was a mixing going on. Not only in that Malta culture do they have DNA evidence, but they also have archaeological evidence because Venus statues were found in that area as well. And the Venus statue comes from the European culture when there was a matriarchy. So here again, we have this newly discovered remains with the artificial cranial deformation matching exactly what was going on in the Petroglyphs culture in South America. Too bad they can't get any DNA, from both. I mean, that would be the next step. And we know for a fact that the Europeans and the Asians were mixing up in that area. So it's very probable that those groups came on over to the Americas, possibly from the Bering Strait or possibly from ships. And then there were probable travels in the Phoenician ships, as indicated in the petroglyphs I showed earlier, at later times. So the evidence is beginning to gather. Now, why were these people modifying their skulls? I believe the answer to the modification of skulls lies with my theory that there were individuals from this European race out of Tyre that had the genetics for gigantism and acromegaly. And the deformation of the skull was to basically mimic those ancient leaders. And it's also in the shape of what the pharaohs were shown as with their headgear. There is some evidence in some books, which I'm going to show here, that these pharaohs had acromegaly at the minimum, and possibly gigantism, as well as some of the skulls found in North America are indicated as skulls with acromegaly and gigantism. So I would imagine that the genetics for that, well, I don't want to call it a disorder, but that's what they call it now. But though that tall stature and the facial features due to pituitary issues were probably carried with these people. And when they kept inbreeding, it stayed with them. And when they bred outside their race, or it went away, or they, it didn't, as they kept increasing in number, the genetics didn't get spread as much. So here we have, like I said, a connection between these red-haired people out of Siberia and the Paracas culture, connected to the Pueblo culture, connected to Lovelock Cave. And there's also a Phoenician connection with the symbolism in the Mississippian culture. Yeah, I've discussed this before in my work. At Moundville in Alabama, they have a very common motif with the Hamza surrounded by rattlesnakes. Okay, the Hamza is a Middle Eastern symbol, and in some cases it refers to the woman's vagina, and specifically going back to the goddess Ashtaroth, who would be the half-sister of Cronus. Interestingly, this entwined rattlesnake around the Hamza is very similar to the Viking horned dragons in the Viking ruins. Now, if you look at the time periods for these major city complexes, they all seem to be around, either 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, and then again between 800 and 1300. And, it just all seems to be connected. And they know for a fact the whole Mississippian culture was connected and went all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, probably even connected into the Aztecs and Mayans as well. It went all the way up into Wisconsin because they have from the Princess Mound, the shell beads from the Gulf of Mexico. So that was all connected in time period between 800 and 1300 AD. Very similar to what was going on in South America at the time, as well as the Anasazi out in the Pueblo area. So you have all of this connected. You have all these red-haired mummies all over the place, and I would probably put a very big bet that there's some red-haired mummies being kept hidden that were found in the Mississippian culture sites. If you look at the Cahokia mounds, there's pottery that looks very Asiatic, and then there's the Birdman tablet with this huge nose that's characterized as, they call it an aquiline nose or Roman nose or hook nose. That's Middle Eastern. So, and the same kind of nose was found in an artifact from the Toltec in Mexico. So, it seems to me that you've had multiple migrations to the Americas, and it's this red-haired, sometimes blonde-haired or auburn-haired Caucasoid race, and they were traveling. There were many of them out of Tyre. They went all over Europe, all over northern Africa, all over the Middle East. They made it out to Siberia and Russia, probably interbred with some of the Asian people, came on over to the Americas, probably 24,000 years ago, if not longer, and started up settlements and then built up to city complexes. And there's different times of mass migrations. There's probably some initial travel, 24,000, 17,000 years ago. My Chronide period's 15 to 19,000 years ago. You've got these ships, and like I said, there's the connection of that symbol from the Winnemucca petroglyphs to those at the Valley of Fire. Well, the Winnemucca petroglyphs are dated over 14,000 years old due to what is on those petroglyphs. They were able to date those. So here you have a symbol that's all over and on petroglyphs over 14,000 years old in outside of Reno, Nevada. So, and then you seem to have a mass period of some of these city-states about 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, which might be the time that they were copper mining. And then you have another massive connection, between the years of like 800 and 1300 AD, which is 500, to 1,000 or less years ago. And after 1300, it just seemed to drop down. Well, at that time, the bubonic plague was hitting Europe. And if they were traveling through ships and back and forth from the old world to the new world, who knows what they brought over or if they had to stop because of that. And then what was left over here bred out. There was definitely Asiatic people and Caucasoid people here. And the mummies are proving it. There's DNA proving it in Siberia, and they've also proven that those mummies are related to the Native Americans. I forgot to point that out earlier from the article. And possibly other races that, we still have to look into. But, for sure, there was European and Asians here, and it's just being covered up. I mean, they purposely came up with this NAGPRA, so you can't DNA test anything. And they're, everything's not European. Well, yeah, it is, actually. There's a lot of evidence that there is now. And the elongated skull over in Siberia matches what's over in South America. And they proved DNA-wise Europeans were there, and the artifacts are there. So, and by the way, that cross of Quetzalcoatl was all over the Mississippian culture as well. So you've got connections with these red-haired mummies that they won't let you properly test. The symbolism's there. The dating, 14,000 plus year old petroglyphs. Mummies out of Siberia, 17,000, 24,000, showing a mix of races. Archaeological finds, Venus statues in Siberia, and all of the symbolism, with the hams and the rattlesnake, the horned rattlesnake, just like the Vikings, all over the Mississippian culture. And the crest of Quetzalcoatl, per my research, Quetzalcoatl would be Dionysus Osiris. And, the atlatl is another connection that many say that came out of Europe 30,000 years ago. It was being used, or something very similar to it. So the connections are here. And like I said, I believe, these people are always characterized as tall giants. Even if they were just 6 feet, they were considered tall and they were considered giants. But I also believe that some of them had the genetics for some pituitary issues, causing them to have gigantism and acromegalia, and also shown in this book. Now, in my other videos and books and blog articles and Facebook and all of that, I pretty much discuss and point out the passages from the Loeb Library and other sources that these red-haired people that had the gigantism characteristics they're abusive to the average-sized human, and it often involved cannibalism or human sacrifice or something just disgusting. But other factions of their people didn't like that and hunted them down and exterminated their genetic line, so to say, so that they couldn't carry on. And that came from Zeus and his children. They got rid of the oppressive red-haired giants and spread their bloodline through many of the Europeans and probably some of the Asians, specifically probably the Japanese royal house as well. And their offspring became the rulers and the leaders around the world. Now, I want to point out that there is some writing in Diodorus Siculus about Atlantis, and it's also described in the Bible. So let me read these passages to wrap up this video and explain to you that one massive cover-up has just happened on this planet and has to be undone. So let me read this. Okay, from Diodorus Siculus's Library of History. He states, "For there lies out in the deep off Libya an island of considerable size, and situated as it is in the ocean. It is distant from Libya, a voyage of a number of days to the west. Its land is fruitful, much of it being mountainous, and not a little being a level plain of surpassing beauty. Through it flows navigable rivers which are used for irrigation, and the island contains many parks planted with trees of every variety and gardens in great multitudes, which are traversed by streams of sweet water. On it also are private villas of costly construction, and throughout the gardens banqueting houses have been constructed in a settling of flowers, and in them the inhabitants pass their time during the summer season, since the land supplies in abundance everything which contributes to enjoyment and luxury. And speaking generally, the climate of this island is so altogether mild that it produces in abundance the fruits of the trees and the other seasonal fruits for the larger part of the year, so that it would appear that the island, because of its exceptional felicity, were a dwelling place of a race of gods and not of men." And I don't, okay, so that was from Diodorus Siculus's Library of History. I do not believe that that's America. He said it was off the coast, or he said out in the deep off Libya. So, this has to be Atlantis. And he says it's an island of considerable size, situated in the ocean, and it is a distant from Libya, a voyage of a number of days to the west. So, Plato wasn't the only one that talked about Atlantis. Diodorus Siculus described it perfectly. And I know there's the Guanchos in the Canary Islands, but I don't recall any kind of description as such. And this was described as a large island, so with a lot of mountains. And I just don't think that would be the Canary Islands. Okay, so let me tell you what the Bible says. Okay, in Ezekiel 28:14, it says, a lament over the king of Tyre. 13. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering, the ruby, the topaz, and the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, and the jasper, the lapis lazuli, the turquoise, and the emerald, and the gold. The workmanship of your settings and sockets was in you. On the day you were created, they were prepared. You were the anointed cherub who covers, and I placed you there. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked in the midst of the stones of fire. You were blameless, your ways from the day you were created until unrighteousness was found in you. So there's a big reference to crystals and Tyre in a mountainous area. What is also interesting in this Bible, from Ezekiel 26:15-19, I want to read this. Thus says the Lord God to Tyre, shall not the coastlands shake at the sound of your fall, when the wounded groan, when slaughter goes on within you? Then all the princes of the sea shall step down from their thrones. They shall remove their robes and strip off their embroidered garments. They shall clothe themselves with trembling and shall sit on the ground. They shall tremble every moment and be appalled at you. And they shall raise a lamentation over you and say to you, how you have vanished from the seas, O city renowned. Once mighty on the sea, you and your inhabitants who imposed your terror on all the mainland, now the coastlands tremble on a day of your fall. The coastlands by the sea are dismayed at your passing, for thus says the Lord God, when I make you a city laid waste, like cities that are not inhabited, when I bring up the deep over you and the great waters cover you, then I will thrust you down with those who descend into the pit, to the people of long ago, and I will make you live in the world below, among primeval ruins with those who go down to the pit, so that you will not be inhabited or have a place in the land of living. I will bring you to a dreadful end, and you shall be no more. Though sought for, you will never be found again, says the Lord God. That was Ezekiel 26:15-19. Okay, Tyre exists today. It's off the coast of modern-day Israel. So this has to be about ancient Tyre, and that is Atlantis. So ancient Tyre would be the biblical name for Atlantis. And lastly, I want to read one more passage. Okay, this one's from Ezekiel 28:16-19. In the abundance of your trade, you were filled with violence and you sinned. So I cast you as a profane thing, and the guardian cherub drove you out from among the stones of fire. Your heart was proud because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. I cast you to the ground. I exposed you before kings. By the multitude of your iniquities, in the righteousness of your trade, you profaned your sanctuaries. So I brought out fire from within you. It consumed you, and I turned you to ashes on the earth. In the sight of all who saw you, all who know you among the peoples are appalled at you. You have come to a dreadful end and shall be no more forever. Ezekiel 28:16-19. Now that's a description of the volcanic eruption that ripped through Atlantis the first time, and that's also showed in one of these Aztec codices. Okay, and to show you that Abrahamic religion is a complete plagiarism of Greek mythology, which is based on people that really lived and were survivors of Atlantis. I'm going to read this from my Bible from Psalm 82, 1-4. Listen to this carefully. God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Give justice to the weak and the orphan. Maintain the right of the lowly and the destitute. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. Psalm 82, 1-4. Okay, if there's only one God, he certainly isn't going to take his place in the midst of the gods. Okay, so someone didn't plagiarize Greek mythology very well. I've already shown you that Jehovah is Zeus. He's the part of the Jewish cult of Jupiter Sabazius. Satan is Prometheus. Iapetus, the brother of Cronus, was one of the leaders of the Watchers, the fallen angels. I've already shown you that in previous videos. So these people traveled the world. They had trade all over the place. They created kingdoms that came and went, and city-states that came and went. Some of them had genetics for gigantism and acromegalia, and they became the leaders. I believe that this artificial cranial deformation is to mimic and imitate those that have acromegalia and gigantism, and to mimic the headgear of the pharaoh. And the genetics for this gigantism couldn't be kept because, once they began to breed out and increase, those genetics didn't show up as well. And those that were pretty evil and had those genetics and the physical strength were exterminated by Zeus and his family. So these red-haired people traveled all over the place. Tyre is where they escaped to, the modern Tyre. Their Atlantis was called Old Tyre, Tyre in the Bible. And they started up again. They spread out through the Mediterranean, North Africa, Europe, the Middle East, India. They were in India. The Dionysica shows you that. Dionysus was in India. And all over China, Russia, Siberia. They probably crossed over. They had ships. They went into the Americas. All over the Americas, Mexico and South America. And like I said, there were different time periods for their travels and migrations, and their city-states have come and gone. And I believe those in the secret societies and in power, they know this, or know it to some degree. I've already shown that Helen Blavatsky and Albert Pike, who were Freemasons, knew very well about Dionysus Osiris. They knew it was the same person. Helen Blavatsky knew about Zagreus, and they even know the estimated time of death, the time period when Dionysus Osiris was murdered. So we have a mass cover-up, and they do it to control the populace and to live like kings and queens and get away with their crimes. And religion was created to control the masses. That's it. That is my presentation on Red-Haired Giants Exposed.